So today's shop day, this is actually part 2 of the Ninja restoration, and because of the weather going south while we were away, we started this a little early, and well, I'm kind of glad we did because I may have a chance today to work on Turbo Steve's tank. He hasn't gotten back to me yet. I'm trying to plan out a day here early in the morning. Not sure how it's going to play out, but that's how I like it. Every day, just a little different. No Groundhog Days. And every morning I have to come out here and flip the battery chargers over, keep all these babies ready to go. Because you never know, we may get another riding day before, well, we may get a couple, who knows. You never know what's going to happen. And that's what makes life interesting. If you knew what train was coming down the track, maybe you wouldn't want to know. But the main objective today, we have the carbon twill that we got from Dave Midgley and Dick Hewitt. And we are ready. Yesterday I prepped up the parts. They're basically ready to go. And we're going to be trying to do the whole lamination on one video. And, well, we'll see how the day plays out. There's something about having a life where every day is different. Every day is a little unpredictable. Well, it's kind of old school, I guess, because a lot of people, well, including myself, of course, when I worked for Ford Motor Company, almost 20 years, every day was exactly like the day before. Exactly. And it wasn't exactly good. It was exactly boring. Anyway, and that's why I like working on motorcycles. Everything on these old bikes is unpredictable. Now, it's worth mentioning, because I'm sure there are some people that this is the beginning of their involvement with the videos by Windy. The reason for restoring this bike, I have other bikes, and to be honest, this is one of the bikes when I come out to the garage in the morning and I look at them, this bike always is like a puppy that says, take me for a walk, take me for a walk. I don't know what that is, but it is a very nice bike to ride. It's very underrated, and I already have the side covers off of this. When I'm done with it, I hope it's going to look just a little bit custom. And Scott is going to join us on some restoration stuff. He's got a 250 Ninja. I hope he'll shoot some pictures or video of what he's up to. And anybody else that's working on their bike, let's share it. We'll get through the winter that way together. And the thing with all these restorations is, when you're doing them, a lot of times you say, wow, this is a lot of time, and oh my God, I'm spending a lot of money, and oh my God. But you know what? The winter goes by fast. Springtime comes. The flowers come up in the garden. And you got yourself a bike for the rest of your life. It's definitely worth doing. And that FZR last winter, all of the cold days and all of the laying on my back and all of the forks and the, geez, I can't even remember how many things we did. 900 hours, but that is a keeper. Believe me, that is one I will enjoy forever. It will never be on eBay. And even though we're at the very beginning of this restoration, I'm already dreaming of what this bike is going to look like with all the carbon fiber stuff I plan on doing to it, and the paint. The whole bike will be painted, and the new graphics. I think it's going to be pretty unique. But today we have one objective, and that objective is, number one, whether Steve comes over or not, if he's able to break away from work, I want to get that carbon laminated. And we're pretty much ready to go as soon as I have my coffee. And because of the temperature drop, the fish are already in semi-hibernation. They don't even come up to eat in the morning. I wish I didn't eat in the morning. And for anybody that doesn't know what it's like to be in the beginning of the cold weather, this is what it's like. Extra coffee. So the first thing, I measured up how big of a piece I want to take off of the roll. I want to try to do this efficiently, so I want to cut the 2 pieces ahead of time before I mix the resin. Now, it's real important when I'm cutting this to use sharp scissors. They make special scissors for this. These are not my special scissors, those are the Kevlar scissors. But anyway, you get to the end of this and there's going to be a Kevlar thread that never wants to cut. You don't want to, there we go. Now, I want to maintain this nice weave pattern. I don't want to get any defects in it if I can help it, so I'm going to leave these parts flat until I actually have the resin on the part, and then just try to drop this in without distorting the weave, because the twill, if you pull on this, it just gets all gnarly. So it's real important just be able to just drop this in position while the resin is on the part, and then start from the middle and work your way out like a sunburst. Now here's a couple of good little tips. I like to use a flux brush. It has nice stiff bristles as opposed to a softer paintbrush. They're about 15 cents a piece when you buy 100 wholesale. I always put some tape on the end because the end of these, they're very inexpensive, of course, tends to be like a razor, and it cuts through the glove, and in the middle of a lamination you got epoxy running down your hands and everything. Now the mix is 3.7 by volume. So what I want to be very, very careful of doing, in fact I'll put the resin in first, it doesn't really matter. Ugh. This is the thing, you gotta be Superman to open these resins. Oh, it's always good to have a pair of big pliers around when you're doing this. And of course, newspaper down. It almost goes without saying, but that you try to be as neat as possible, but I found anytime you're working with resin, and it just gets to be messy. So we need 3.7, and it's, in this case, it's by eyeball. This is not a critical, it's not like Epon is or Huntsman, where you got to put it on a grain scale. I really am interested in trying this resin at some point in time, maybe not on this part, but to see if you let a part cure out, if you can buff it out. Because the Huntsman resin at the mufflers, the R1 mufflers are made out of Huntsman resin, high temperature resin. You can buff that resin out. That resin is just, now this is a little bit, okay, there we go. And that'll be an interesting test on its own. Now there are definitely some do's and don'ts when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now all epoxy, in theory, you're not supposed to use a wooden stirrer. A lot of people years ago, and I remember this, I think it was with Epon, that was one of the big things, that you were never supposed to stir epoxy with a wooden, we were using balsa wood or I guess a paint stirrer. The problem with that is that the wood absorbs some of the material and the chemicals in the catalyst. And so what you would have is stuff that really was prone not to dry. This is tip number 2. This is a critical one. The bigger amount of epoxy that you mix, the quicker it's going to dry. It makes heat internally. There's a word for it, exotherm, endotherm, I don't even, it doesn't matter. You just know that it gets hot. And I, at one time in my experimenting years, mixed a giant amount to make a propeller mold. And when I was making a propeller mold, it caught fire in the house. And it could have been a real disaster. But the trick is, when you think it's mixed, it's about 65 degrees in the shop right now. It should give us a little extra working time. If we were outside where it's 75, 80 degrees, well, in the summer, say if you're in a warm weather climate, well, it's going to go off a lot quicker. Heat makes it go off quicker, and they say not to even use it below 60 degrees. You'll lose some of the properties of the epoxy. Anyway, I'm going to mix this. When you think it's mixed, no sense letting the camera run, mix it at least a minute more. They even say that on the can. The first thing I've done is, once again, prep all this down, let it dry. I want to paint the epoxy on generously. Again, I'm not making an aircraft part where I've got to worry about saving 1 or 2 grams of weight. This, I want to make sure I get good adhesion. And then the biggest thing today will be the babysitting. And babysitting, this is why I wanted to do this on a dedicated day. I didn't want to have a lot of other stuff, a lot of honey-do lists and things to do. Because what's going to happen, as this epoxy cures, it's going to want to pull up out of the valleys. I don't know until I make this part. And it's better if you start this early in the morning, and usually 3 or 4 hours later, it'll be, you don't have to babysit it. You never know. It'll depend on the heat. We could use a little hair dryer to try to speed that up, but I don't want to just distort the whole process, because as it's curing, I can keep working it with the little flux brush, get it down into all the little niches and corners and whatever. Now the trick is, I've got this on here. I've got to go over to the other table and just get that piece to drop on here without a big adventure. This whole part is an adventure. And you might be thinking, holy mackerel, he's spending a lot of time and energy for what amounts to be a very small part. Well, you know what? Maybe you're right. But I thought when I did my concept sketches, this was going to be a critical part of making this bike mine. And it doesn't have to be anybody else's, as I've always told other people. You do exactly what you want. It's your motorcycle. And anybody that doesn't like it, it's on them. Okay, so we got a nice layer that. Now I'm going to be real careful about doing this. Again, I don't want to pull on any of the threads. The twill tends to go around corners if we were using other material, and they do make many, almost unlimited, designs of the material weave. Going to happen is, as I start to put the resin on this, I want this to stick, and the idea is not to pull on the threads any more than necessary. And what I want to do is I want to leave just enough on here, maybe 3/8 of an inch, a half an inch, but I don't need this extra. And this will allow, just like when you're recovering a seat, this will allow that material to get down into the corners just a little bit nicer. And that Kevlar string at the end is always a nuisance. Now I'll save those strips for whatever. Now I'm going to kind of let that just sit for about 15 minutes, because then what's going to happen, it's going to have to start to get, it's going to get tacky. And then I'm going to have to do a very scientific thing here, is as it gets tacky, get it to sit down into that trough. And keep looking, make sure I don't get the weave out of position. It wants to constantly walk up, but as it gets stickier, I can just, there'll be a point in time when it'll just stick right down there. And that would depend, of course, on the temperature. Now, anytime I see a hair, a loose hair up here in the weave, and from time to time one will just imagine, like here, it'll just magically appear, I can pull it out with the flux brush. And this is where it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get it to sit down there, but nothing we can't figure out. Now what I did, I used a couple little ordinary alligator clips along the edge here just to pull the part down. And in this case, the little Bondo spreader fit right in there, so that held that piece down while I'm babysitting it. And it'll just make it easier, less work to babysit. And once I have that full load of resin on there, let me just get this. This will take a second or two to get out of here. I also want to use just a little bit of heat to see that we have everything laying down. Now a lot of times, right about now, you'll see a fisheye. And when the resin starts to cure, you can let that fisheye spread out and get rid of it. I'm just looking to make this a little stickier than it normally would be. Again, a cure time, the time at which it gets sticky is going to change from shop time to shop time. And you can see why I left the whole day for this. You don't start this while the hamburger is on the grill. Alright, that should be enough. Now, what I'm looking around for now, any place that's not sitting down, I still have a little bit of resin. And by the way, you can already feel that the jar is getting hot. So you notice resin is starting to kick off when it's in a big amount like this. It means I got plenty of time here. And this is what I call babysitting, just going around. Any amount of stuff I can get taken care of now instead of in the final product would be just a lot less work for me. And I want to leave a generous amount of resin on because I want to be able to sand it and block sand it. So now it looks like the only spot that's not sitting exactly the way I want. It's right up in the corner here where you probably won't even see it, but this is going to be the hardest part to get right, is right up in that corner. But as the resin gets stickier, it just lays down better and better and better. And it's just that babysitting time can be 15 minutes. On some shop conditions, it can be 4 hours. I don't know, because this is only the second time I've used the 207, the catalyst, but that's why I'm doing one part at a time, and I will allow the whole day just to get this resined up and get it sitting under a heating vent overnight. A couple little things that made this job easier. First of all, the clamps that held that in place pretty nice while I was babysitting. That's little Bondo spreader worked out great, and I made an extra little piece to just push that down into the trough. That seemed to work okay. An extra clamp there seemed to work okay. Now, if you look at the resin, and I'm just doing this while I'm taking a break, the resin is hard, but that jar is so hot you almost can't touch it. So if I mixed any more of that, I really could mix about half of the amount, and I'll be careful to mix a little bit less for the next part. But I'm going to go have a cup of coffee, and the reason for that is I want to let this sit. I'm going to put it under a heating vent, let it sit while I'm having coffee, see if there's anything I still have to do when I get back, and then of course, the magic of video, I got to do the other part. And I'll probably do that off camera just to save some time. And it should be nothing different about the other part. It's pretty redundant. And I'll know ahead of time that I need that piece to press down in there. That's one of the things I have to have. But again, not a big deal. No part of this was really like a real challenge. One final thing I probably forgot to mention, the actual working time to where the amount of resin that's in the cup kicked off and got that I couldn't really even use it to spread it. That time was about 45 minutes, but I probably, see what would have, if I mixed less resin, and I'll measure it out, so I need about maybe a little more than half of that amount. But again, this is the stuff you learn along the way. And the purpose of that, the purpose of all of this is to learn something, and not only when we learn it, to be able to somehow realistically pass it on. And there's just no substitute for when you got to do two parts like that, break it up in the middle and take a coffee break, because this is, it's about an hour and a half that you're on your feet, and it's a little bit labor intensive doing this. But at the end of the day, we'll have this done. So the adjustment that I'll make for laying up the second part is I'll mix a little bit less resin. It'll give me a little more working time, because it's the resin that's in the cup that goes off. The bigger the mass, of course, the quicker it goes off. So by having less in there, I know I need about 3/4 of what I mixed the first time. I'll make the mix accordingly. That'll give me a little extra working time, even though I don't really need it. I'm just stacking a deck in my favor here. Now, and if I have any resin left over, what I'll do is I'll just paint on another coat on this, just because this is a laminating resin. West is a laminating resin, means you can just keep, it glues to itself very well. So what that'll do, it'll give me a little extra material to sand, and it's this little gap in here that's the only real, I got to get a better part for that, for the next part before I do the other layup. But these are the little things you learn on the first one, and the second one goes a little quicker. Okay, and I want to make sure I don't have anything on here. This is a good rough surface, just rough enough that I'll get a nice bite to the epoxy. I would not want to have this that it starts bubbling up a couple of years later. Now the extra resin that I have left over, I'm just going to paint an extra coat on this. This will just get us one step ahead. And what I did, I turned the heat in the house up to the moon, so this would start to kick off. I've got all the resin laid out now. Now heat is my friend. I want this to harden up as soon as possible. I'm getting excited about seeing these parts. And this way, actually almost no resin went to waste, except that first little bit on the big mix. I just mixed a little bit more than I needed to, but. And I get very excited about seeing these parts when they're going to be sitting on the up by the heating vent overnight. When I come down in the morning, You got a kid coming down to see his Lionel trains under the Christmas tree. But a layup like this is relatively simple. Actually, this is a good way if you've never used carbon fiber before. This is a good, like, first project to work on. Do a side cover, do some kind of a little thing that you can experience how to use the resin. Don't be intimidated by it. It gets a little intimidating sometimes, but we're tough guys. We were tough guys. We wish we were tough guys. Wow. I just watched a really good movie called The Mule. If you haven't not seen The Mule, oh my God, funny movie about old people. Not old people, what am I talking about? You know Clint Eastwood is almost, I think he's 89. He's going to be 90 soon. Wow. Little known facts in the world of carbon fiber. Anyway, we're approaching the point where this is going to have to just sit under a heating vent. And this could not have gone better. Well, those parts look like they're going to dry up. We got them right under a heating vent here. Oh boy, and that heat is cranked up. In about an hour, 2 hours, I'll be ready to touch them and look at them and see them and whatever. And I won't bother sanding them. In fact, I always like to give it extra time to dry before I do any sanding. And then I may put another coat of resin on that. I'm going to see how that sands out. Anyway, this was quite a productive day. Now, it's my understanding that Turbo Steve is waiting for one more decal. He ordered some more decals for this. But the weather has not been appropriate for painting, that's for sure. Maybe that's him calling me now. Who knows? Anyway, I do hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.